Hello, welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today is making the case, tips for writing letters of support for your faculty and those that you mentor. We have a small but mighty group joining us. While we're waiting for microphones to kick in, let me just stop this for just a second and remind you of a couple of upcoming Tuesday topics that might be of interest to you. Next week, we've got dismantling racism in global engagement. The week after that, we have deep work in scheduling hacks for academia, a way to regain control and get things done by Michael Bruno. And then racial equity R3 project awardees present. And then a quick scheduling note on Tuesday, November 3rd, which is election day. We've got Dr. Sherry Goodall, who's going to be one of our presenters here today, who's going to do creating a great conference presentation, but we've shifted that to an earlier time slot. So please join us if you are able. All right. Let me just get this back up on the screen here. All right, take it away, Dr. Dimaria-Ghalili.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Tuesday topics, making the case, tips for writing letters of support for your faculty and those that you mentor. I'm Dimaria-Ghalili, Associate Dean for Interprofessional Research and Development in the College of Nursing and Health Professions, also a professor of nursing, and I will be joined today by three department chairs who are our panelists who will be giving us insight into their tips for writing letters of support. Dr. Sherry Goodall from Creative Arts Therapy Department, Dr. Glenn Williams from Physical Therapy and Rehab Sciences, and Dr. Patty Zuzello from Doctoral Nursing. So next slide, please. So just what are we really focusing on today? One of the most important roles of department chairs in faculty development and promotion process is to write letters of support for their faculty. A well-crafted and evidence-supported letter is really important in the applicant's promotion portfolio and often can be the difference between success and failure. So our leaders are going to really talk about the methods that they use to successfully support their faculty, achieve their academic goals. And I think these tips that we'll hear today are really important, not only for chairs writing letters of support for faculty, but faculty who are writing letters of support for colleagues as well. So I just want to set the stage for a moment. Our recently revised non-tenure track and tenure track promotion policies in the college integrates the Boyer's model of scholarship. And I just want to really highlight again what this model of scholarship is all about, because that is all faculty are evaluated on scholarship, and the extent varies on what track you're on, but the types of scholarship that we look for is the scholarship of discovery, which is really original research that creates knowledge, and evidence of this type of scholarship is publications and presentations, development of new technologies, scholarship of integration, which is integrating new knowledge, and this could be in the examples as literature reviews or systematic reviews, textbooks or chapters in a textbook, developing or evaluating an interprofessional course. The scholarship of application and engagement, this is really disseminating knowledge in formats meaningful to end users, such as fact sheets for professionals or patients and podcasts, and evaluating innovative programs and practices in clinics and communities. And then the scholarship of teaching and learning. And this is identifying teaching models and practices that optimize learning. And examples would be developing and evaluating innovative instructional methods, developing and testing instructional materials, and designing and evaluating a program level assessment system. So there's many different ways of doing scholarship, and it's just not the traditional funded research. So next slide, please. So with that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Sherry Goodall, who will talk a little bit about her experiences in writing department chair letters.
Hello, and thank you Dr. Dimaria-Ghalili, for this. Thank you for inviting me onto the panel. It's really an honor and a pleasure to share some of the things I've learned over the years in writing letters of support for faculty members. I'm realizing as we meet and spend time with this, that this really is a skill set that faculty members and department chairs and mentors need to have. And I'm sitting here wishing that there had been a seminar like this that I might have had early on, because it's not a skill set that we typically we just learn it on the job. And I'm appreciating that there is something to sort of lay out a little bit here about this. So Darren, we can go to the next slide. First of all, and there are some very basic things here, things I've just picked up along the way. And you'll probably hear us emphasizing some things a couple of times over the course of the hour. Chairs write a lot of letters. Today we are focusing on writing letters specifically for faculty promotions, but that skill set, that activity for chairs really has a very broad spectrum as well, and for faculty members as well. We'll be writing letters to recommend people for jobs, for research awards. We'll be recommending people with master's degrees to go on to doctoral programs. We'll be recommending people with doctorates to go on to postdocs. We might be external evaluators for a faculty member in another university who is going for an award or for promotion or tenure. And of course, our emphasis today, recommending for promotion. All of these different types of letters need a different treatment. They need a different mindset on our part, and they need slightly different kinds of preparation. Some emphasize potential, and some emphasize achievement. I would note that at least in our environment here at Drexel, in my experience, many times promotion is recognizing achievement, whereas when someone is awarded tenure, that's more recognizing both both past and future potential. And I'll go on to the next slide. And what this really is about is to say that the writing process begins before you sit down to write. So in many times, now some of these points don't apply to writing for promotion, but aspects of them do. Usually before sitting down to write a letter for a referee, for a candidate, there should be some communication with that person. If it's for a job, a promotion, a doctoral program, an award, generally people should ask ahead of time if they're going to name you as a recommender and if you're going to need to write a letter, or if there's some other format for your recommending. People should really make this as easy as possible for you. Chairs are very busy. Over the years, I can say that I probably write a letter for someone for any of these reasons at least once every 2 weeks, and once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. So we do this a lot in our roles. Occasionally, the requester can provide some draft language. For example, if someone's going for a travel award, to actually provide a little language. Now that would not be appropriate in a promotions letter. Darren, can you go back just for a moment? Occasionally people can provide with talking points. Requesters of letters should be very clear on the recipient's name, title, position, the entity for which it's being written, address, deadline. You shouldn't have to go out there and look for all that information when you're writing a letter for someone. If you're writing a support letter for a grant, the grant funder mission, etc. And sometimes, as for external reviews for promotions, that's not possible. You might be requested by someone other than the candidate themselves. But it's important to, when you can get this information, the requester can provide this for you before you sit down to write. Now I'm ready for the next slide, Darren. Yeah. Now the letters themselves. the letter really should not only cover the basic requirements associated with the promotion, but should really identify unique strengths of this individual. Let the person stand out. They should not look pro forma. They should be written specifically to the audience for whom they're written. They should clearly convey unique and particular abilities and qualities of the candidate for whom you are writing. When the audience of your letter is the tenure track or non-tenure track promotion committee, reflect in the letter the priorities of the committee and be sure to cover all the categories of achievement that are expected. Ready to go on to the next slide? Yeah. In addition to covering all those categories, the letter should communicate something to the readers, something additional that cannot be gleaned from the other submitted materials. Those other submitted materials are going to be CVs and work samples and personal statements. I think it's a good idea to try to include at least one specific example that comes from your own firsthand experience with the candidate, so that the committee can really get a feel for what this person uniquely brings to the team and to the community of the college and the university. I can go on to the next slide. I think there's one more. We were asked to think about how do we get into the zone for writing. And so this just is a little bit about my own writing process when it comes to a letter like this. First of all, leave a lot of time for promotion letters in particular. These are very high stakes letters. They should be very strong letters. They should be very well written letters. I spend a lot of hours on promotion letters. I'll generally review the candidate's materials and then I let it marinate a little while and let those unique things about the candidate sort of bubble up. You really want to write from a position of being very connected to that person and really feeling truly and strongly about the strengths of that individual as you write. So you want to get yourself into that space and really give time for that. Let yourself really get in touch with what you appreciate about them as you get ready to write. And then I did identify a third phase. As with any writing task, after it's written, let it sit. Go away from it. Sometimes I call that a lateral drift. And then come back and read it. Read it through the lens of the audience of the letter. So you can shift perspectives. And then it's very important to take a last phase through to really clean up the typos, really tune up your voice as the supervisor, recommender, mentor of this person. Think about your word choices. It should be, I'm calling this squeaky clean, because any errors on your part can reflect poorly on the candidate themselves. And so it's really worth putting in that extra round of work at the end. And that brings my planned remarks to a close, and I really look forward to the presentations of my colleagues here and the discussion we'll have afterwards.
All right, so interestingly enough, or at least I think it's interesting, is that we had done these presentations independently, and yet Sherry and I have some unintended overlap that I actually think points out the fact that as you develop expertise and familiarity with this process, there are some major activities and some work responsibilities and approaches that really become common to people who do this kind of work. So I'm going to take the opportunity to embellish some of these points and perhaps skip over others that may not need to be repeated. So we'll see how we go here. Okay. All right, I'm going to start with some organizing steps, and that is that, as Sherry had mentioned, it's not uncommon to be asked as a department chair or as a supervisor or program director to provide a variety of different types of references and coaching activities. And I do think that while our focus here is on working with our employees, as you start to develop your network in your administrative role or writing peer review letters or letters for subordinates in the non-tenure track or tenure track promotion process, you do find yourself being asked to do more and more of that, including for awards, external fellowships, grants, these sorts of things. So I think that to step back for a minute, one of the ways to organize yourself is to really be clear about what the ask is. What type of reference or review is being requested by the individual or the agency that has reached out to you? Similar to what you've heard, I also do a quick glance of dossier data, and I follow that with a deep dive. I always begin by looking quickly through the materials that have been provided for me to get sort of a sense of the overall package and how that looks. I think about what the ask is specifically, and I try to cluster the data that I have reviewed into the categories that are consistent with what I'm being asked to review and provide. You appraise what's been given to you, and then you also evaluate it, and then you come to a decision about that particular candidate that's based on facts, particularly based on outcomes. Now, that means that for the most part, you are being asked to be a wise judge. And I think that's important to think about the kind of work that we do in that way. In other words, why were you asked? Were you asked because you are a department chair, a program director? Were you asked because you are a peer or a noted colleague of the individual who needs to have this documentation and appraisal completed? Is it because of role expertise that you have, and so you've been asked by an outside organization or university to do this external review? You will find yourself being asked to do both external and internal reviews. Internal reviews are often either peer reviews or they are reviews of people who report to you, essential for the tenure and promotion process, or with non-tenured faculty, essential for the promotion process. Some of that then is the result of you being asked based upon your reputation. And it's really important then for your own professional stake to make certain that you are objective and that you are fair. You are essentially putting your reputation on the line by the work that you do in recommending, advising, and coaching others. You have responsibilities, of course, to assist your reports in being successful. You also have responsibility in terms of a fair and candid appraisal process, okay? I usually will suggest to people that they avoid any kind of preconceived agendas or politicizing or that kind of thing. Don't provide any guarantees or assurances of the outcomes of your review prior to having the opportunity to actually complete it, particularly with external reviewers. This is important. It's not uncommon. Prior to starting at Drexel in 2013, I was tenured professor at another university, and I used to get a lot of requests from outside organizations, including occasionally from Drexel, to do non-tenure track reviews, or at that time, external reviews for tenured people. And, you know, many times I needed to be clear about, send me what you're looking for, send me the dossier, I will be happy to give it a fair and honest appraisal, never with an outcome that's sort of predestined or ordained. And remember that all of this evaluation processing is private. Whether you are looking at somebody internal to Drexel or one of your subordinates from a bureaucratic process or an external reviewer, you need to handle the materials that you read confidentially and make certain that they are in fact private and that you're not sharing the outcome of your appraisals or the materials that you've reviewed with anybody else who really has no business, frankly, having that kind of information or seeing those materials. So when you're considering the ask, or what people have reached out to request you to do, as Sherry pointed out, there are a number of types of reviews and appraisals, and I'll make short shrift of this slide. Your internal review, of course, happens as a supervisor in a supervisory capacity, peer review, or you know, protocols and procedures within our university in terms of the appraisal process. External reviews, many times you're asked because you are considered or recognized by someone somewhere as an expert in the field. You may also be recognized as an expert in a particular role. So for example, I've been asked at times to do reviews for people who are also clinical nurse specialists because that is a role that I have a lot of experience in. And it may also be that you have been asked to serve as a reviewer at the request of the applicant or the candidate, or you may also have been asked by an internal individual or a stakeholder like a dean at another school or a chair at another school, rather than being asked by the applicant or the candidate. So what do you want to think about first? And I think that these are really important things that sometimes we don't ask. One is the due date manageable? There have been times when I have been asked to do work in a time frame that is just simply not reasonable. It's similar to, you know, our own work lives and how busy they get. Other agencies and universities, et cetera, also run into time crunches. And there have been times when I have been asked to do things in a time frame that I know I will not be able to do my best work over, you know, the next 4 weeks because of an accreditation visit or some kind of self-study activity or whatever it is. So make certain that the due date is manageable. And if it isn't manageable, be clear and candid about that. You have less flexibility with that as an internal reviewer when you need to provide an appraisal for example, your tenure track faculty person. There's, you know, due dates are due dates, and you have a responsibility to sort of look far out and make certain that you keep these in mind. But external review, you do have some flexibility with that, including saying no to the opportunity. Make certain that you understand the request, and if you don't understand it, go back and get more information before you commit, and make certain that you have what you need to accomplish the task. So scrutinize the required benchmark, and what I mean by that is this: tenure, promotion, awards, grants, hiring decisions, all of these things are based upon appraisal, reference letters, candidate evaluation, this sort of thing. And you want to be certain that you understand the established criteria that should be shared with you. Do you understand the criteria, for example, for promotion in rank? Do you understand the criteria for tenure? Are there differences in criteria for tenure as compared to promotion in rank? And if so, what are they? It is typical for many times to write your reviews for both tenure and for promotion in rank. But in some organizations, there are different requirements for that. So be sure that you're very clear about that. Organize the required criteria in manageable bites or clusters so that you can stop and start easily. As Sherry pointed out, many times these appraisal processes and the end work product take hours of time. And it is not always the case that you have hours of time in a single sitting to do this work. So I tend to take a look at what the requirements are. I get them documented in a table sort of form. And then as I'm looking at the dossier, or I'm looking at the vitae or the awards criteria, you know, that somebody has responded to, that kind of thing, I start to fill in those columns with that information so that I can easily walk away from that work and return to it and not have to catch myself up too much. Keep in mind that Drexel system, as well as others, their appraisal system oftentimes rely on an electronic shell or a portal through which you enter to acquire your information. Make certain that you try those links and access points early. If you procrastinate only to then find that with very little time remaining, you are having a glitch, a technology glitch, then you have, that creates a lot of problems and a lot of angst that could have been avoided had that been checked out sooner. Your preliminary review, similar to how Sherry approaches her work, examine the dossier to get a sense of the applicant's data organization. Many people, when they're pulling together their dossiers or their binders or their electronic files, they will oftentimes follow the schematic of the information or the requirements for either that change in rank or that award, et cetera. So look to see if the dossier is sort of following along that same list. If you don't have a dossier, usually if you're doing an external and internal review, you do have some kind of packet of material. But if you don't, request the vitae and request the individual to bullet information and to highlight key points that they want you to include in the letter. Remember that you are not always the only appraiser. And so if that individual is, for example, applying for some sort of award or promotion in rank. There may be several other reviewers, and they may have different sets of points that they want each reviewer to include in their letter of support. So do make certain that you have a clear understanding of what is being asked of you. And take a look at that fit between the dossier and the review format, because that can be really helpful as you organize your own appraisal of the candidate. When I'm doing my deep dive, this is where I have 2 or 3 columns. On the one column, I will have thematically clustered requirements, which you could call it column A. In column B are my data points that I have pulled from my dossier or my vitae. And in the third, I will usually document outcomes. Remember that we are very outcome driven. In healthcare, of course, we're very outcome driven. And that is parlaying into a real focus on how candidates have influenced practice, how they have influenced science, those sorts of things. And so you want to really think about outcomes when you're developing your letters of support. And I find a third column can be really helpful for that. As Sherry pointed out, you want to be very accurate in the words that you use, the names, the position titles, dates, committees, organizations, those kinds of things. It's really important because your letter reflects the quality of your appraisal, rightly or wrongly. And people make snap judgments about the quality of your work and the integrity of your appraisal when there are typos and errors and those kinds of things in its content. Finer points. Keep in mind that we're at the crux still, I think, of trying to make decisions between what is research and what is scholarship. I know at Drexel we still have this conversation in CNHP, and it can be really difficult to figure out the difference between those two. So if you are writing an appraisal of a candidate, make certain that you have a real clear idea of what the difference is between scholarship and research and how to attend to that in your letter of support. Consider journal quality. Look at bibliometrics, for example, impact factor or H-index factor. Unfunded grant submissions are handled differently by different departments, different universities, and you need to think about that. Although people will oftentimes submit grants that are unfunded and put them on their vitaes or use them as a description of their work, unfunded reflects effort, but not necessarily quality work. I'm not saying that the work isn't high quality, but what I am saying is to make certain about how to handle things like unfunded grant submissions. Manuscripts, are they under review? Are they in press or are they published? Again, criteria often vary for how they should be handled. Books, pay attention to, is it an edited book or is it an authored book? And if somebody is an author, pay attention to authorship order and percent effort. And I sometimes will say to people that when they give me their dossier, I want them to put next to their publications and next to their grant submissions, et cetera, a percentage of work effort so that I can be clearer about what this individual has actually contributed to the outcomes that I need to respond to in the appraisal letter. Okay, as Sherry already pointed out, it's a formal writing style. The only thing I'll add to that is that if you're sending your appraisal or your letter of support electronically, make certain to use delivery and read receipt options so that you know that it got there and it got into the inbox of the correct person. And if you're sending hard copy, always use priority mail or some other kind of service with tracking, always. Suggestions then for your consideration to close. As you're writing that letter, use active voice, be succinct, make certain that the appraisal is reasonably unique and individualized. I suggest that you avoid multiple superlatives. And what I mean by that is most people are working to achieve the requirements. You are not, neither is the candidate, exceptional in all ways. They don't need to be exceptional. They need to satisfy requirements. And there are going to be some areas where what they have done is meet the requirements. And where they may have been excellent, you want the opportunity to be able to say excellence has been achieved in such a way that you're using it as a rarity so that it has an impact on the reviewer. consider the applicant disposition from what you can see, but also things like the structural and situational factors. For example, if you're writing a support letter for somebody that's in your department for promotion and for tenure, think about the context within which this individual has worked as well, and whether or not there have been occasions where they've really needed to rise to the occasion because of open positions or inadequate supports or those kinds of things. And work that into your letters in such a way that it gives that individual credit where credit is important, okay? And so remember too that your internal candidates should never be surprised by the evaluation that you provide in these kinds of letters. Tenure and promotion, as Sherry said, is high stakes. And that means that there should be progressive appraisal evaluations throughout the time of that person, pre-tenure reviews, this sort of thing. Somebody, one of your colleagues should not, again, ever be surprised, taken off guard, or unaware of the kind of evaluation that you will ultimately be writing in that candidate letter. Okay. I hope that that's helpful, and thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Dr. Williams?
Well, good afternoon. I want to start by thanking Roseanne and Darren for inviting me to speak with you today, and also want to thank my fellow panelists for some great talks that were very enriching. Today I'm going to give you some pearls. I'll try to cover it very quickly. Some of what I'm going to talk about has already been said, and the reason why we're repeating it a little bit is because it's very important. And that in terms of really writing effective letters. And the approach I'm going to discuss today and the pearls I'm going to share apply to all letters I write. And I take a very similar approach whether I'm writing for a non-tenure track faculty member, a tenure track, an assistant professor, or a full professor. And whether they're at my own university or a different university. And I probably write more letters for people outside of Drexel than in Drexel, even though we write quite a few for people in Drexel. And so this approach has worked well, and I'm happy to dig down and get a little bit deeper in the question and answer time. So the first thing, let's see if I can get this to move forward, that I think is really important is that this statement by Plato, and you've heard it already today, that beginning and your preparation is really, really important. You need to prepare to write a strong letter. And so this could be looking at the dossier and the materials, but to be honest, if it's writing a letter for tenure and promotion for one of my own faculty, it begins years before I actually write this letter. It's in the annual reviews. It's in the mid-tenure review. It's in my regular meetings with faculty, as well as writing a good career development plan and business plan for the faculty members, so that this is all pretty transparent, and there's an ongoing discourse and conversation that's going on. That allows me to be able to very clearly present and provide perspective on challenges that the faculty member has overcome or been faced with. And it doesn't always have to be that they've achieved something truly remarkable, but they've achieved something that it took remarkable effort in overcoming, and that I can provide perspective on how important what they've done is and what we can expect into the future. Okay, so the first step is to prepare, and I'll dig down a little bit. Blocking time. It takes a lot of time to write really good letters, and the minimum, and this is for like a letter for an award, would be 2 to 3 hours, and that takes time to, includes the time to prepare as well as the time to write the good letter and to look it over. As I said, for something where it may be a tenure and promotion, that doesn't sneak up on us. We know it's coming in a year in advance, 2 years in advance, and I begin thinking about what my statements may be well in advance, even though I may not write them down, so that I can move forward. But you need to block enough time to really write a good letter, so don't wait till the end. as Patty and Sherry both talked about, really having context for why you're writing the letter and the purpose of it is important. The who's, the what's, the whys. One of the things that's very important is you know who specifically your audience will be. And so sometimes that's a tenure and promotion committee, but I'll often dig down and really look at who the members are, okay? And really try to understand. If it's for an award, I really do try to understand what is it about. Patty noted that, you know, if it's a tenure and promotion letter, what are the standards, and doing the background on that. If it's an organization or even within a college, what's the mission? What's the focus? What are we really looking at here with a letter? And because we really want to try to create alignment, okay, between the mission of the organization and what the purpose of the letter is for and what we're writing, okay, as well as with the individual. You're really being asked for substance. Then it's something that's very important, I think, and I taught scientific writing for over 10 years. And, you know, most papers aren't written for the reader. They're written for the investigator to tell the story of what they did and why they did it. When in reality, if you want a paper that's cited a lot, and if you want to meet the mission of the journal and so on, you really want to focus in on the reader and what their perspectives and what's of value. So, you know, as we evaluate faculty, even for an award, there needs to be some value proposition of what value are they contributing, but you also have to provide value to the organization you're writing for. This letter should be something of value that helps them make a decision, right? Your job is to help them make their decision easier. And so it's important to write a very clear letter and to write one that's specific to what they're asking you for. Okay? I'm crossing out here, you know, we talked about making the case in the title of this, but in my opinion, rarely are we making the case. In writing an award, yeah, specifically if I'm putting someone up for an award, then I may be making the case. But our job with, for instance, tenure and promotion letters are not to make the case that this person should be promoted. It really is to give you a valid appraisal. And I think we could rephrase this and say, making the case that can be made, yes. Okay, we're going to be making a case. But typically I'm not trying, and I don't approach it as trying to make the case for this person. It's not about, it really comes down to me trying to, as Patty said, have a valid appraisal, my credibility's on the line, and the whole system for it to really work has to be credible and valid. And so really the truth matters. And so what's the award about? We want to be very objective in it. And you know, if I can't write a good letter and I've been asked to do that by an individual or by a team of people, I need to be honest with them up front that I don't think I can write a good letter, okay, based off of what I'm seeing here. And plenty of time for them to find someone else. And I've done that, okay, and I've been frank with faculty that wanted to go up for promotion that I couldn't write a good letter. I can't, you know, recommend them for promotion right now. Okay, based on things, but I will do everything I can to help them be ready for it and to really create a development plan that can get them there. Okay, and the whole credibility of the system, I think, revolves around that. These letters, in just about any letter I can conceive writing as a chair and writing for faculty, need to be data driven. And really, it's not about what I think. Obviously we will provide perspective, what I think is important, but the data should do the speaking. And if the data is not there, then it is going to do the speaking. So you have to have data and metrics, okay? And so you have to really have tools to be able to report. And then I really try to focus on the data, okay? And highlight that in a way that's compelling and also provides perspective and unique perspective, as both Sherry and Patty have talked about. If there's been a really high impact paper, and really when it comes to being promoted or when it comes to getting awards, the influence and impact of the person's really what most people are interested in. And so we can try to look at perspective on what impact and influence are they having, looking at papers And I really want to get into, well, why is this paper important? How has it contributed to the field? Okay. And then other metrics. We talked about H-index with Patty and citations. We should be able to have some idea of the impact of this work so we can really discuss on that. Hopefully, if I'm a content expert, I can talk about how this particular paper has shaped other people's work, okay? So that I can give really some substance into the importance of the faculty members' work and why it's special and warrants some sort of accolade. We want to highlight remarkable achievements as well as, and as I was saying before, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that is anyone would look at and say it's award winning. It could be overcoming significant challenges in achieving, something that is, a little bit above average. That could be really remarkable under circumstances. And so our ability to provide perspective is quite important. I mean, we're amidst COVID-19. Research and scholarship is challenging right now. Hopefully, we'll be doing our job and getting people tenure extensions, but there's a lot to be discussed in terms of all the different things that have happened this year, not just COVID-19, but many different things that have really been a distraction that need to be brought into perspective. In most cases, people are interested in what the future may look like. And so you could provide insight and rationale for your reasoning there related to ongoing influence and impact and what the long-term will be and the promise of the individual. In tenure and promotion, that's really important. Okay, because we're really vesting someone for the long term to create a cadre of strength at a university when we're looking at tenure and promotion. In terms of writing structure and style, I think this was really important. I really do believe that just like writing a grant, how you write it is extremely important in whether it's going to be effective. This is a military term. I came out of the military, bluff, bottom line up front. In your first paragraph, tell them straight up whether you recommend or don't recommend and why, okay? In a brief, very strong. It's out there, they know exactly where you're at. I highly recommend bottom line up front in the letter, okay? Like with writing a grant, you want to use bold, italics, and underline to emphasize your key points. Make it very clear, make it easy and unambiguous for the reviewer, right? For the reader. We want to be clear. These letters usually shouldn't be very long. It's rare that I go to a third page, okay? And so it needs to be very clear, no waste words, topically driven. If you can break it out into sections, even better with headings. Make it very clear and data driven and keep it short. They're going to glance through them pretty quick, but you want every statement to have a purpose, okay? Finish strong. I always end with an unambiguous summary that's not 100% redundant, but reinforces, okay, what I've said throughout the letter, okay? And so I think that it's important to finish and there to be no doubt what you think, okay, and your perspective on things. And then the final steps before I ship the letter, okay, and again, I put it up here in the corner. It always should be on official letterhead, okay? It needs to be official. It needs to be professional. I always read out loud, okay? Or today's software will read it to you. You will hear mistakes and little mistakes that you'll never pick up on if you read it in text, if you read it out loud, okay? And then in addition, I use a grammar checker. The one I use